Welcome to the Doc B podcast. I'm Aaron Cook, your host and director of program evaluation in Clovis Unified. Today, I have the privilege of talking with someone whose story is deeply connected to this district's past, present, and future, our Deputy Superintendent and Clovis Unified alum, Norm Anderson. Norm's journey with Clovis Unified started long before he ever stepped into district leadership. We're going to talk about that journey, what shaped his belief about leadership and relationships, and how those early experiences as a kid in our schools continue to influence the way he leads now. Norm, thanks for being here. For those who may not know you, can you introduce yourself and share a little bit about the path that brought you to your current role here in Clovis Unified?
My name is Norm Anderson, currently the Deputy Superintendent for Clovis Unified. What brought me to Clovis Unified as a student was my parents, actually. I went to 5 different elementary schools in 6 years. Skipped kindergarten because I was so advanced. Not really. And so I did a stint at Tarpey and Cole. My parents liked the district, but we ended up moving into Fresno Unified. We ended up moving back to Clovis, so I went there in 7th through 12th grade, Clark and Clovis High. I was lucky enough to get involved playing tennis in 9th grade because they didn't make any cuts on the freshman tennis team. Coach Ramage at Clovis High was really just trying to get people enjoying tennis and ended up playing at Clovis High for 4 years, meeting some great people. Good friends, became my second family, and ended up going and playing tennis at City College simply because my best friend in high school was going to City College. I had no ambition to go to college, no reasoning to go to college. But did after I got done playing there, coaches asked me to come back and coach. So I ended up teaching at Clovis West, taught there and coached tennis for a number of years and got my administrative credential. I always wanted to be a high school counselor, and Steve Weil said, well, don't just get your PPS, go get your admin credential so you can do both. Shortly after I got a call from Christy Weens at Mountain View. I knew nothing about elementary, but she had faith in me. After that, was a learning director at Clovis High School, and then a principal at Sierra Vista Elementary. Carlo Prandini saw me at a elementary track meet, and he was just named the principal at Clovis West and needed a deputy principal. He knew I had worked at Clovis West for a long time and wanted to have somebody that knew the staff and the culture a little bit. So I was his deputy principal at Clovis West for 3 years, then went to Clovis High as principal. Carlo called again after about 3.5 years and said, I'm going to open up a new area. Would you like to come be the principal of Clovis North Educational Center? So I followed him over there and had a great experience. Became an area superintendent for Clovis North, then associate superintendent for school leadership, and now eventually the deputy superintendent. So my path. What was the question?
All right, so there you have it, a whole Clovis Unified career in 1 minute. I think we're done. No, we're not done. Let's actually go back and talk about how college slowly became part of your story. What happened that turned that around for you?
Yeah, it was very interesting. I really didn't start playing tennis until the 9th grade. I may have played a little bit at Clark just for fun, but I was never part of the team. But it was a good group of young men that I kind of bonded with. I think if we had that back in the day, I would be a transition or an impact kid. My parents both worked. They never ever watched me play tennis in high school or college. That just wasn't available for their schedule. In high school, they went through a divorce, and we moved just down the street from Sierra Vista. But I always talk about friendships are the most important decision teenagers make, and I just happened to have a real good friendship with Jeff Ogus and the Oguses and Ace Trophy, and their culture was, in their family, you're going to go to college. I still really didn't have much of an idea of what I was going to do, and the senior year, we were in Valley playoffs. Coach Waite from City College came out to watch Jeff play, and he watched me play at the same time and said, well, if you want to come on over to City College also. It sounded better than anything else I had to offer. I always joke I got a full ride to City College to play tennis, which was $50 that paid for all the classes, all the books, a good schedule that would accommodate tennis. So that was really the only reason. One conversation out on the tennis courts with Coach Waite, knowing what Jeff was going to do, that just led me into, why not? We've got a plan for the next 2 years. And then I think when you enjoy what you're doing and you're having a little bit of success with it, it opens up a few other doors. I think that's the other reason I owed Coach Ramage a lot for providing me direction when I was in high school. When I went back and coached with them, I saw it from a different perspective. I was the benefactor of being at a right place at the right time with good people.
As you talk about these coaches and friends, it really sounds like they made you feel seen. Is that fair to say?
I did, yeah. It's kind of interesting. I guess I've never thought about that, but probably the best relationships I've had with my athletes or with fellow coworkers is being together as a team, being part of a team, being a part of a presence or something of that sort. I think that goes a long way in making people feel valued and wanting to do their best work. It was being modeled for me, and it really didn't have a name back then necessarily, but it definitely helped provide some incentive to do well.
Was there a teacher, coach, or leader who really changed your trajectory as a student and as an educator?
There's actually been a couple. Coach Ramage was probably that first impact. At the time, I always felt like, gosh, he was tough, he was hard. He paid attention to everything we were doing, our behavior, how we conducted ourselves on the court, all those things. So I think that was probably that early on where you never wanted to let the person down. And for me, Coach Ramage was a person I never wanted to let down. I realized that he did that with every one of his athletes. And I guess I'm lucky I never had him as a government teacher. I heard he was a pretty darn tough government teacher also. But he always worked to make sure you could pass the class if you put the work in. That was his whole idea. And so I think that was probably the first one for me that made me feel special, made me feel valued, made me feel part of a team, held me to high standards, and held me accountable. It was an accountability that I didn't want to let him down. Carlo Prandini has always been that mentor for me in the education field. When I became an administrator, I got to be a learning director at Clovis High, and I really only worked with him for about 4 months when he was a deputy principal. But I just saw how he led, the relationships he had with people there at Clovis High, the accountability, the high standards. It was something that I think resonated with me. If I was going to be a leader, how do I want to lead? It's not a title. Leadership is a verb. You got to lead. And so I think I was the benefactor there of just adopting somebody as a mentor that took interest in me wanting to be successful, because if I was successful, Clovis High was successful. Like all of us, it's the whole gamut of people that are working hard for that. Again, it's somebody else I didn't want to let down. So I think for me, that was a type of leadership style that resonated with me.
Do you think all your teammates had that special connection with Coach Ramage the way you did? And what does that teach you about the art of coaching?
You know, I think it's the art of a good coach, a good teacher, a good administrator, is that you make everybody on the team or who's working with you feel special. When you have a group of people that all feel special, all feel valued, and are working towards a common goal, the potential is limitless. It's just amazing the things I think you can achieve. But I think your point is well taken. At the time, I just thought, boy, he's harder on me than he is on Jeffries. But really, he was hard on everybody. And it wasn't a hard, like, old school tough. It was just really high expectations. When you left a visiting site, it was cleaner than when you got there. It was when you're on a bus, you're treating the bus driver with respect. When I was an associate sup for school leadership, I would interview every teacher with the superintendent, and I would ask the question, who is your role model or mentor in your life? Sometimes they'd mention family, and many times they'd mention somebody in education. The conclusion we came to is the conclusion you came to, which is the most amazing thing is, as valuable as that person was to you as a role model, they were role modeling for every other student in that classroom, whether it's second grade or whether it was an English teacher in high school. They were doing the same thing for every single student, but at the time, you felt like the one that was being singled out, and for good or bad, you felt that way. Coach Ramage knew how to create a strong bond and to get people to work hard, and I think Coach Ramage was just that person.
I love that you referred to some of the Doc philosophies in your description of high standards and expectations. We're going to get to that in a few moments, but was there a specific conversation or experience that made you say, I want to be a teacher?
I can remember it to this day. So getting back to Jeff Ogus, we worked together at the family trophy shop. We had every class together at City College. We played tennis together, and we roomed together. And so quite often he was my ride everywhere I was going. We went to Fresno State together both our junior years, and I was waiting for him. I think we were probably going to work, and he had to stop in the counseling center, and it was in the education office. So I was sitting waiting for him, and there was a magazine on the table, and I kind of thought maybe I wanted to get into teaching, but I really didn't know what I would want to teach. Loved math, but who knew what I wanted to do. I found a magazine, and it was a teaching magazine, and it was the National Teacher of the Year It was an article on that teacher who happened to be a health teacher. And so I'm reading about what he taught and everything about why he was the National Teacher of the Year. And I'm going, those are all the subjects that I appreciate. Health, nutrition, mental health, the whole gamut. I love the classes I had at City College around those areas, and I never thought about that. Never thought about that. Gary Sells was my health teacher at Clovis High School. All of a sudden, reckoning back to Mr. Sells, this is what Mr. Sells did. And he was like one of my favorite teachers as a freshman. I immediately walked over to the health science office at Fresno State and met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Sherm Sobey. His wife was a teacher in the district. I eventually coached their son in tennis. She coached alongside me. She did the girls when I did the boys at Clovis West. He was just a huge proponent of health education and health services in general. I just connected with him, another person who just had a love for what he did. You could see it everywhere he went. He just loved it. And so he kind of goes, this sounds like something you'd be really interested in. So changed my major from math into the education department and became a single subject health science. Yeah, that was the moment.
What a great story. Let's turn our attention to Doc Buchanan. When you hear his name, what's the first story or memory that comes to mind?
The first thing I remember is being interviewed by him February 13th, 1990. I went into his office, and I share this story sometimes because I really don't remember if there was anybody else in the room. There quite possibly was. Don't remember it. And in my mind, I just remember this dark wooded room. Doc Buchanan was at this large desk, and I was sitting across from him, and he hits a button underneath his desk and the door automatically shuts. And he instantly starts talking about how he remembered me playing in the Valley Championship tennis match at Roding Park against Clovis West. And I'm just thinking, I had no clue that he was there. I had no clue that he knew who I was. But of course he was there. He was the superintendent of only 2 high schools. There was only 2 high schools at the time. They're both playing against each other in a Valley Championship tennis match. He was just recalling things that I hadn't thought about in a long time. And instantly made me take a deep breath. And that interview, which really, if you look at Doc's charge now, was pretty much the history of Clovis, really helped me understand that working for Clovis Unified was much bigger than what I was even anticipating of what it was going to be. There was a lot of high expectations. There was a lot of understanding that we work together. This isn't an admin versus teachers. Like, we actually do all this hard work together. And there's going to be a lot more expected of you than maybe at another district. It was pretty much a, do you know what you're getting yourself into conversation from Doc Buchanan. I think after that meeting, I realized why Coach Ramage was the way he was, why Coach Lee was the way he was, why Gary Sells was the way he was. I started to see what he was telling me about Clovis Unified. I was then saying, okay, that's why these gentlemen in my life, or lady teachers I had, that's why they act the way they do towards us. That's why they show us this type of respect but high standards and help us through these challenging situations. It became much more of an understanding to me. So really a year later, a year and a half later, the board switched and he was no longer our superintendent. I was just beginning to understand as a teacher what Doc really meant to our district. That was a definite transition time. Without Doc being our superintendent, we went through a couple different superintendents while I was a teacher. When I went to Mountain View, Christy Weens knew Doc Buchanan really well. So all of a sudden, Doc would just be in offices that I would go to. He never came to see me directly, but he would always be in an office that I was going to, whether it was Clovis High or at Mountain View or something like that. That was sort of my connection that he really is Clovis Unified. And even though he's retired, there was still a strong connection to the people that used to work for him that would always want his counseling, his advice. And he would sometimes just provide it whether you asked for it or not, which I think was the best thing because I think he really believed everything that he was doing. And even as a community member at that time, never wanted to see Clovis Unified fail. He reminded a lot of people what it was to work for Clovis Unified, what the expectations were. As I got a little bit older and a little higher in the administrative ranks, I guess, I got to sit with them a few times. The conversations weren't necessarily what to do. It was, what are you planning on doing and what's working? What are your successes? What are your challenges? And he'd always have just sage advice, just good relationship advice, good advice on navigating different issues that provided a perspective that was really pretty solid. And I think I got the benefit of also Doc Buchanan through Carlo Prandini, Steve Weil, Walt Bird, Gary Giannone, the ones that had worked so closely with him that you couldn't sit in a meeting without them having some sort of quote of what Doc said or an experience that they all went through when Doc was superintendent. So I've been the good benefactor of a few of those stories as well.
As a dad, how did you see Clovis Unified show up for your kids?
Yeah, I had two boys that went through Riverview, Granite Ridge, and Clovis North. The philosophy that always resonated as they went through is hiring's the most important thing we do. They were so lucky to be surrounded by great people, great human beings, men and women who poured into them that had very high expectations. It's not easy being Aaron's kids or Norm's kids when they're going through an education system. But the reality is they helped raise our kids. They helped raise my boys. And there was often days where they did, because of the administrative duties that we have, they were very often around their teachers and their coaches a lot more than they were around me. But at the same time, you also don't want to miss out on those experiences. And so for me, watching McKay and Cooper grow up and have great teachers that were tough, great teachers that had very high expectations for their behavior and their academics, great principals and great coaches and great advisors that enabled them, if they did what they're supposed to do, gave them opportunities to do something more challenging. There's so many people that they didn't just do it for Norm's kids, they did it for every child. And so you want your kids to be around people like that. So for me, hiring is the most important thing we do, just reminded me that we want to fill it with good people, but we want to fill it with good people for all of the kids. We say that in interviews sometimes with teachers. We're looking at the teacher across from us, would we want our kids in that teacher's classroom? Even though they may be in a totally different area, totally different grade level, the way our district is growing, you never know. They could be at your kid's school at any given time. So if you can answer the question, yes, that would be a teacher that I want my own kids to have. It's an easy answer then.
You've mentioned Doc's philosophies a few different times. You've been a teacher and an administrator. Which of these philosophies have guided you in each of those roles?
As a teacher, probably the students are at the center of every decision, because I became very aware at Clovis West when I first started teaching that I had gone to college to teach a subject in health science and science. I realized I was a teacher of students, just using my subject to connect with them. I learned that from Ann Howell, who was my master teacher at Clovis High. She did a really good job of that. But until you have your own class, you begin to realize you're not just going unit to unit to test, everything of that sort. These students are living their lives in your classroom. And the great lesson plans you have, the great idea you have can get sidetracked because something happens in lives, something happens as life is going on, and something else becomes a priority and it has to be handled. We had a ninth grade group of teachers who just wanted to see that transition from 8th to ninth grade go better for ninth graders. We didn't call them professional learning communities, we just called it our own little group, and I got lucky enough to be a part of that group. And these teachers all put the students at the very center of everything that they did, how they set their classrooms up, how we communicated to the kids, what the expectations we all had, who was going to communicate to parents. How could we make that ninth grade year a much better year for them so that potentially they're not behind when they get into 10th grade and they realize that there are adults on that campus that care a lot about them. For me, as a teacher, that was a big basis for the type of teacher that I became. I guess I always wanted to be that teacher because that's who my mentors were, but until you start practicing the craft, you don't really realize it. And you're the only adult in the classroom with 38 kids, you begin to realize that there's a lot more going on than just the subject you're teaching that day. As an administrator, Carlo would always share the idea of know your job and do your job. For sure, he modeled it for us. You didn't just have to know your job, you need to know the other jobs as well. So for me, that was one that I needed to become very knowledgeable about what my job duties were so that I would never let anybody down. Never wanted to make my emergency somebody else's emergency because of poor planning or whatever. I'm going to say that philosophy because that helped me identify my role as an administrator. I turn that into leading through relationships because I believe we have to have connections with the people who we are leading. We have to know what we want people to do and what we want people to achieve, but we have to have relationships with them that they'd actually want to do that hard work. We already acknowledge that working for Clovis is hard work. If we want to get more out of our team, we have to understand relationship-wise what drives them, what motivates them, and how we get more out of them than what they thought they were able to produce, which is the sign of every good coach, it's the sign of every good leader, it's the sign of every good teacher. Carlo Prandini used to talk about leadership is two things, it's systems and it's relationships. Systems is know your job, do your job. You have to have a good system in place, but you have to have the relationships with the people that they actually want to do it. One of our past superintendents would say, if you're leading and you look behind you and nobody's following you, you're not really leading. You may be leading a system, but you're not leading people, and people are what drives the system. When we say people, not programs, that's really what it is, and we're leading people. It is kind of interesting because it becomes part of our language. It becomes part of the work that we do. I think if we can develop relationships with really smart people, and we can develop relationships with really hard workers, and we can develop relationships with people who put kids at the very center and the basis of everything that they do, then we can lead them.
So, in the toughest moments working in this very large district, what anchors your decision making?
Yeah, I think the higher up we get into administration, and I say higher up, not in a hierarchy, but with more responsibility, I think it does require us to really begin to think about why we do what we do, why we make decisions, what is the best thing for students. The best thing for students is not always the easiest solution. And people want to take easy sometimes and hit the easy button. But ultimately, what may be easy today for a student isn't what's right for all students, and especially down the road. And so, no matter what it is, budgeting, staffing, curriculum, facilities, whatever that may be, if we just come to an understanding, if what we're trying to create or what we're trying to change is better for students than we currently have, then we're on the right track. It's not always the easiest path, but we're on the right track to doing the right thing for students. And if we surround ourselves with adults that believe that same thing, then we're going in a good direction. Some people throw it back at us and go, well, what about the adults in your education system? Do you not worry about them? We do. There's not a day that we don't think about all the adults that are making our district what it is today. And the hiring process in Clovis Unified is a tough process. But I think it's during that interview process that we really find out the people that we're hiring, whatever jobs, into the grounds department, into transportation, into our school settings, do they have a true understanding that what we do in Clovis Unified is always going to be at the benefit of students while supporting staff and while supporting the system in place? And I love it when I can go now in my role and sit in different meetings and hearing people say just that from very different points of view. You could be in a transportation meeting and they're talking about the most efficient way to get students to and from school so they don't have to sit on the bus as long. I can sit in a grounds department with Carlos Ailman and him leading a meeting, and all his team leaders from the areas are talking about what's going to benefit students for an athletic event or a special event that's going to bring parents onto campus. How are the students going to feel when they walk onto campus the next day? Like, we don't have to prompt that. That is just who they are because they understand that responsibility of carrying on that philosophy.
We've all heard the saying that healthy schools build healthy communities and healthy communities help build healthy schools. What role does the Clovis community play in the success of our schools, and how do you try to support that relationship?
What I've always been trained on is that the community is not somebody you go to only in times of need. Those relationships that we talk about with educators and students is just as important with educators and the community. Quite often we think of that as the parent community. For us, that's hugely important. With almost 44,000 students, you're talking about lots and lots of parents and guardians that become part of our community. We try to do everything we can to bring our community into our schools. Lots of opportunities, not just from getting to know your teacher and your school site, but educational opportunities. How can we help parents navigate the challenging role of being a parent? How can we educate them on the expectations of Clovis Unified and what it's like to go K-12 or TK-12 through Clovis Unified? What are the opportunities going to be available at every level along the way? so that they can help their child navigate the educational system, the workforce, or college afterwards.
For someone who just started working here, how would you describe what makes Clovis Unified different, unique, compared to other places?
I think it's easy to say that people make it special, but there's a whole lot that goes into that. It's hard for me to compare Clovis Unified to other districts. Other than one coaching season at another high school outside of Clovis, this has been all I know. But I think what I've learned from people that I've hired is when you're in the middle of it, you don't see it being unique, you're just seeing it be the culture of what you're doing. And you're surrounded by people who work hard, surrounded by people that have high expectations for you and for themselves. But at the same time, when people come in from other school districts, staff that are hired to come into Clovis, they're the ones who better explain why it's different and what drew them to Clovis. That drew them to Clovis was they wanted to raise their families in a great school district. They wanted to be surrounded by people who have a positive nature about working with children and students. They wanted to go to a place that they feel like if they had ambitions to grow, this was the place that they were going to be supported in their growth. They realized, as we all realize, that Clovis is the lowest funded unified district that we have in the county. So we weren't going to be able to be paid as much or anything like that, and we were going to have higher expectations. But that's who you want to work with. I think those opportunities that we have all been given to work in our district is what makes us different. We are surrounded by people who want to do the best for our students. And not that life doesn't come into play. There's life changes and things that happen in our own lives. But when you do hard work with people, you know that they've got your back when things at home aren't going so well, or when you're going through a challenging season of your life. You're going to be surrounded by people that have got your back and are going to help you navigate through that. That's just the reality of working with human beings. We're going to have those challenges. And so everything that you pour into those relationships when things are good, you're going to get it back when you need that support. And for me, that's what makes Clovis Unified so great. We're a district who keeps growing, a district who keeps trying to improve and get better. And that takes work. It's real easy to be complacent and happy with where we're at. We're good enough. And there's people that want to be good enough and just leave me be. But that's not what we wanted as parents for our children. That's not what Doc built this district on. Doc built this district on continuous improvement. And there were goals out there that just seemed unattainable. Unattainable. Like, are you kidding me? Goals. At the same time, there were people that were meeting those goals. They were reaching those. There were athletic programs that were doing things that nobody ever anticipated we could ever do. And choral programs and band programs and every type of program. And so when you start surrounding yourself with people who are successful and having success working with students, you don't want to be the weak link in that. I think that's what sets us apart, maybe from other districts. Again, I don't know. I just know that it's helped me thrive. And it's been a benefit for my own kids and family. We used to talk about true leadership is how well the school or department is running 1 year after you leave. Because if you've done your job, it's going to continue to be good and it's continue to get better after you've left. I would hope that's part of what Clovis Unified continues to be moving into the future.
All right, Norm, as you wrap up your career here, what advice would you give to a brand new teacher or administrator just starting out at Clovis Unified?
What I would want them to know is rely on each other. If you're a brand new teacher, rely on the teachers and rely on your administrators. If there's a difference about our district, and I've heard it 1,000 times from people that I've worked with that didn't grow up in Clovis Unified or this wasn't their first hiring job, is that the relationships that our teachers and our administrators have together is different than it is at other sites. It is what makes us different. So work on that relationship all the time. Take an interest in each other. Take an interest in the work that you're doing. And know that when the great times are there, we're going to be there to celebrate together. And when the challenging times are there, we're going to be there to navigate those challenges together. That is, I believe, one of the things about Clovis Unified that I always want to tell everybody about. I have fellow administrators in other districts that have been in Clovis and they come back or I see them in the gym or wherever it is, and they'll say, Norm, it's not the same. It's just not the same. And it's very easy for them to identify what's not the same. I think those are the reminders for us that's so easy to lose. We have been a great school district because our teachers work together, our administrators work together, and our teachers and administrators work together. You could say that about our departments around the district that help support everything that goes on in our schools. When we work together and we have a severe respect for each other about the work that each other does, this district will continue to do great things.
Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed hearing from someone who makes CUSD a special place for students and families. This podcast is dedicated to every classified and certificated employee who shows up each day to enrich students' lives and help them be their best in mind, body, and spirit. We'll see you next time on the Doc B podcast. As Doc always said,
don't ever forget our motto. Sickle.